Fairport convention come about?
Good question, yes. Gosh, okay, right. Yes, very good. Fairport started when I was at school, and it was a couple of school friends and myself got together and tried to figure out what kind of music we liked. And I think we decided that we liked music with good lyrics, and so we started tracking down songs with good lyrics, people like Dylan and Phil Oakes, and we started to do that material. And I think about 67 we were playing around the London clubs.
Playing around London clubs. What happened after that? Were you spotted by anyone?
Yes, we were spotted at the UFO Club, which was the happening place in town at the time. And we were spotted by a certain Joe Boyd, who was an American gentleman who was helping to run the place. And we made records with him from that point onwards. And we got signed to Island Records. And we were there for many years, much to their embarrassment.
To their embarrassment? Why was it to their embarrassment?
Well, we never sold any records. But we tried.
You tried?
Yes.
Okay. What songs do you feel show Fairport at your best?
I think the best period of Fairport was when Sandy Denny was singing in the band, and some of her vocals I think were exceptional. There's a track called Who Knows Where the Time Goes, which Sandy sings. On the same album there's a Dylan song called Percy's Song, which I think is one of the best things that we ever did. It's quite a long song, but it's very dramatic. I think it was a very good version of that particular song. And probably one of the more important tracks that we did was a track called A Sailor's Life, which was an early experiment in joining traditional music with rock music. And I think it was a very successful experiment. And for us it was a very enjoyable experience to record that in the studio. I think it was take one, and we hadn't really rehearsed it, but we just did it, and it worked rather well.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how we felt when we heard it back. We couldn't quite figure out how it turned out so well, but somehow we managed to do something exceptional, we felt. Critics may argue.
Which was your sort of personal favourite one out of all the tracks?
It's difficult. My favourite album was Unhalf Bricking. I think it was the most magical album for me, in that what came out of it seemed greater than whatever went into it. It was always surprising to hear the playbacks. Everything sounded better than you thought it would, which is a wonderful experience when you're recording. I think the favourite track would be Percy's Song off that album.
Great. Who are your major musical influences?
Oh boy, well, I don't really know. Probably Django Reinhardt, I think, would be a great influence on the guitar anyway. And probably James Burton, who was everybody's influence. Everyone who plays a Fender guitar probably listened to James Burton. He was the guitar player with Rick Nelson and later with Presley. I've got a picture shaking hands with him on my wall. Which is,
when did that happen?
Last year. Let me see. Songwriting influence is probably, I don't know, I wouldn't say Dylan necessarily, although he was the outstanding writer of his generation, but I think he opened the way for a lot of writers anyway. His being there opened a lot of doors and enabled songwriters per se to come along and wield influence in popular music. I think my own personal favourite writer is a lady called Baroness Nairn, who was 18th century writer in Scotland. She was a noblewoman, aristocrat, and she wrote anonymously. No one found out it was her until after she died. And she wrote fabulous stuff. She wrote The Land of the Leal, and what else did she write? The Old Hoose, stuff like that. Well, who knows? Anyway, I think really my favourite writer is Anon. Is whoever wrote the Scottish ballads. I think the Scottish ballads are the best lyrics available in the English language. They're very succinct. They're incredibly visual, and the use of language is extraordinary. And most of them were written in the northeast corner of Scotland, in a very small area. I think that really is the most exceptional stuff in the English language, and it's the stuff that I still go back to.
Is that the sort of thing you listened to as a child?
Not really. I heard some of it as a child, but you know, when you're a child, you don't really think about music. It just goes in, and you know, the stuff I thought about was, you know, Elvis Presley, you know, Buddy Holly. I didn't think about the stuff I'd heard as a child until I was about 25 or something, and then I suddenly realised that there had been a lot of input at an earlier age, and it had all gone in there. You know, all the jazz I'd heard as a child and all the traditional music I heard as a child all came back. I realised that I could remember Duke Ellington arrangements from when I was 5-6 years old. Without having heard them again since. I could remember the whole arrangement and how the whole orchestra sounded. It's surprising how vivid stuff is at that age.
So he was an influence as well, in a sense?
Well, I suppose so. I'd like to think so. I can't play jazz, it's too many notes.
Okay. In Fairport, you merged traditional English folk songs with rock. How did that come about?
I think that came about through frustration. I think as a band we felt frustrated that we'd never be as good as Muddy Waters at playing blues, because we were just in the wrong place, and we'd never be as good at country music as Waylon Jennings, and we'd never be probably as good at playing jazz as Fats Waller or something. So we felt very second-hand. And we looked at our contemporaries in England, and we thought they were pretty second-hand as well. We didn't see a lot of interesting stuff around us, and so we really searched for something indigenous that would give our music credibility for ourselves, and would give us the opportunity to excel at a musical form rather than be merely imitative.
What musicians have you seen or played with and admired?
Ooh. That's a big question.
Who's the person you play with, perhaps, who you've admired most?
Have
you the opportunity to play with?
I can't remember.
Is there no one that you thought, oh, I'd love to play with him one day, and you've actually been able to do that? Or you haven't been able to do it with?
Well, I'm sure. I can think of the people I haven't been able to. I'd like to play with McCoy Tyner. He's a great pianist, and I'd love to play with him. I think I do play with most of the people that I want to play with, and have played with. I'm trying to think who I admire greatly. Yes, okay, it's coming clearer now. I was always a great admirer of the Watersons, who were a family of singers from Yorkshire, and I've had the chance to work with them on frequent occasions. They're great. If people could hear them, on Radio 2, they just snap them up. I mean, they're so wonderful that you couldn't resist them, whoever you were, and they just sing, traditional music, but they're great. I played with Elvis Costello recently, which is something I've wanted to do for a long time.
How was he?
He was fine.
Don't do this to me.
I'm sorry. Well, he's a great performer. He's one of the most intense performers that I think you can see. I enjoy playing with him very much.
Did he actually produce anything with you? I mean, he's been producing recently, isn't he?
No, he didn't. He recorded a song of mine, which was very nice. And I was supposed to play on his record, but the messages got mixed up, so I missed it. But I was going to play guitar on his record, which would have been wonderful for me, but well, some other time perhaps.
Can you describe the rock music scene in England in the late 60s and early 70s?
It was a time of opening, perhaps that's the word. It was a time when everybody could get a record contract, and most people did. You know, if Hapshash and the Coloured Coat could get a record contract, then, you know, Mrs. Bloggs could get a record contract. You know, it was easy. And on the crest of the wave that was psychedelia, a lot of bands reached a wider audience. Bands like Fairport, who were in no sense really psychedelic or no part of Flower Power or anything to do with the late 60s particularly, in fact were sort of diametrically opposed to the musical styles of the day. We managed to get an audience at that time. And I think many other bands rode in on that wave, as in the late 70s, many bands rode in on the wave of punk, but, you know, quite obviously today, you know, they're not punk. You know, people like, you know, Costello, for instance, and Blondie. And
Did it change with time?
Yeah, very much so. It was just a key to the door, you know, to record companies and to the public. I think it's a kind of time when people are open to a broader range of music as well. The music business seems to expand and contract in strange ways on a sort of a cyclical basis. About every 10 years, you know, things open up a bit, and then business takes over and things sort of clamp down again and become very, very narrow in style and very conservative. I think we're going through a period of deep conservatism at the moment.
Okay.
I've forgotten what the question again?
So, can you describe your perception of the American rock scene in the 60s?
Rock scene in the 60s. Well, I must say that being over here, being in a band, America seemed to be a more interesting place to us in sort of 66, 67. We were great fans of the Byrds. We thought the Byrds were a very interesting band. The Byrds had a fairly unique sound, these electric 12-string a lot, and they incorporated traditional forms of music, and they were also fairly futuristic in their outlook. That they used technology as much as they could. McGuinn was always interested in outer space and such things. So it was an interesting combination of musical styles, and I think we found the Byrds very appealing, and it was interesting to hear bands like Jefferson Airplane and such, who seemed to be doing something a little bit different. Moby Grape, I think we used to like as well. So yeah, the West Coast stuff sounded interesting.
This show is about the progressive rock scene, highlighting bands such as Traffic, Jethro Tull, Genesis, ELP, Yes, King, Crimson. Any comments on any of these bands?
At the time that most of those bands were playing or were becoming popular, I didn't really listen to them. It didn't seem to have much bearing on what we were trying to do. So I wouldn't really have heard very much of them. I used to like Traffic. I thought Traffic were an interesting band, and we were on the same label as Traffic. And we did a couple of tours of America with Traffic, and it was very enjoyable to listen to them. Very talented.
Can you remember when it was? What year was it you toured?
I think we toured 70 and I think in 71 as well.
That was a tour of America or London?
That was 2 tours of America.
Can you comment on any of your last 2 excellent LPs, shootout and The Lights and Hand of Kindness. Were you happy with them?
What can I say about this song?
Did you like them at the end?
Yes, it's
Was it hard making them?
No, it's a piece of cake.
How long did they take you to make? Did one take longer than the other? Were they both sort of like projects built up?
Yes, good questions. Yes, fine. Can't think where to start on this one. I think these albums were the result of a kind of a different way of looking at things. I think in the late 70s I got very frustrated with music, and I think I retired 3 times without great determination, and it became very hard to get a record deal for old lags like me, and I really started to rethink what I was doing, and I decided that it was time to do it yourself. So I stuck out an instrumental record that I recorded myself, and I did the sleeve and everything, and I sort of stuck it out and I sold it to people at gigs, and I thought, this is great. This is the first time in my life I ever actually made a profit out of a record. This is astounding. This is definitely the vein in which to continue. At which point I met up with my old pal Mr. Boyd, who I mentioned earlier on, and he said, "Well, I've got a record label. Let's make a cheap record and actually make something viable, something where we can earn money." So we made a very cheap record. It cost about £10,000, and I mean, it did. It sold sort of 75,000. So we actually earned something off it, and it was probably because of the speed at which it was recorded. It was a much better record than I'd made for a long time, because I got very bogged down in the studio in trying to come up with product. Whereas making a record fast, one really had to go for it. We didn't do anything more than 3 takes, and everything was live. So we just whacked it down, stuck it out fast, and it was fun. And we did the same with the next one, and they were both fun. And we've done the same with the new one.
What's the new one?
The new one is called, I'm not sure what it's called, I think it's called Across a Crowded Room. And this will be on Polygram. This is a new label. Polygram are a large company with lots of money. They're going to put enormous backing into this record, and are going to make a late developer like me extremely wealthy.
Well, I jolly well hope so.
Well, I jolly well hope so too. It's about time. The world owes me something.
Okay. Can you comment on your... Oh, no, we've done that one. What are your current activities then? I mean, you've explained you're doing a single. What else are you interested
Album,
in?
yes. Well, I don't have time for other things really. I've just been 2 months kind of recording and mixing and sticking out and doing everything else on the new album, and that's about all there's time for. I'll be touring America probably in March. I'll be touring Europe probably in May, and there isn't much time for hobbies or fun or anything or socialising. Yeah, you probably think it's all laughter and parties and houses in the country, but really it's tough. It's a grind.
Well, I never knew that.
You never knew? No, few people do.
No. That's good. What are your overviews of the rock music in the 60s, 70s and 80s?
Oh,
if you could somehow sum it up.
Well, over, let's see, 60s, 70s, 80s, well, over, let's say, 25 years, it seems to be a battle between, a battle being constantly waged between music and business, to me. Sometimes music's up here and business is down there, and music sounds a lot better for some reason. Business becomes secondary, and a lot more good music seems to get on the radio and into the charts, and then you get this other era when business is up here and music's down here, which is like now, and everything sounds the same. Everyone plays it very safe. everyone spends tons of money, but nobody good gets signed. I exclude myself from these rationalizations. Well, that's the way it seems to me. It seems to be a bit of a seesaw. I think creatively that there's always the same amount of creativity, but it doesn't always end up on record. I lament the passing of punk. I thought punk was great. I thought the Sex Pistols were the best band of the 70s, and probably would have been the best band of the 80s if they kept going.
Who do you reckon is of the 80s?
I really don't know. I don't see anything really at the moment. I think
there's nobody really out there that you admire in any way.
There's a lot of people that I admire, but I wouldn't see them as being having a revolutionary influence on popular music generally. There's a very good band in San Francisco called the Bobs, who are an a cappella group, who I think are wonderful, and I hope that they reach a wider audience. There's people in England that you hear as well who are very good, but I don't know. It's hard to imagine the next step, and even if I knew what the next step was, I couldn't tell you because that would be giving it away.
I mean, it must be very hard to compare yourself with somebody like Boy George or your Marilyn.
That's hard.
Or your Dead. What do you think of those sort of performances?
If Boy George wasn't as visually spectacular as he is and wasn't as controversial, he wouldn't have ever got a record deal. So all credit to him for actually having the know-how to get his foot in the door. He would have been ignored otherwise. And he has a very good voice. And beneath the veneer, I think the music is interesting. Not always true the music's interesting, but in his case I think it is. Sorry to answer.
Can you sum up Richard Thompson in a few sentences?
That's a gruesome question, and I can't answer that. It's not for me to sum up what I do. I think the day I do is the day that I've really stopped trying to achieve anything, and it's almost like it's it means creative death, if you like. I try not to think in terms of career or in terms of continuity from day to day. I find it very important to really to reassess and to recreate everything every day, and to re-examine everything every day, and to have those kinds of opinions about yourself, I think is absolutely suicidal. Somebody else can do that, when I'm buried, preferably.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I can sum it up. Okay. So how did Fairport Convention come about?
When I was at school, I had a couple of friends, Ashley Hutchings and Simon Nicol, and the three of us started playing music together, and we covered various styles depending on what the engagement was. If it was a blues club, we'd be a blues band. If it was a folk club, we'd be a jug band or something. We could put together almost anything in almost any style, and this eventually solidified into a regular lineup and a regular electric band. And that was probably about a year before we got recorded, and eventually we were playing around the London clubs enough to be noticed by Joe Boyd, who was a record producer, and he signed us, and we made lots of records and no money.
And where was it that you were actually discovered?
I suppose that we were discovered, quote unquote, at a club called the UFO Club, which was the happening room in London at the time. It was where you went with your, you put your caftan on Friday night and pop down and smoke some banana skins and through a sea of haze and smoke, you could just about make out Pink Floyd at the other end of the room, playing some interminable number. Yes, it was fun in those days.
Great. Okay, and what musicians have you seen or played with and admired?
I think I've played with most of the musicians that I admire, except maybe McCoy Tyner. I'd like to do something with him. I've worked recently with someone called David Thomas, who used to play with KROQ, who I think is extremely good. I enjoy working with him. I've done some stuff with T-Bone Burnett, who I think is very good. Up-and-coming young songwriter. He might like that. I've done something with Elvis Costello recently, which was very rewarding. He's someone I admire a lot. And I can't think of anybody else, really. Must be somebody else in there. Well, I think most of the people I admire are dead, and it's rather hard to play with them.
What about your Scottish lady?
Oh, I think she came under songwriting or something, or influences.
Do you want to talk about when you were going to play on what's his name's album?
Elvis's album.
Elvis's album.
I was due to play on Elvis Costello's record, but the messages got mixed up somewhere in the pipeline, so I didn't quite make it. But perhaps some other time.
Okay, that's great.
That we ever did. It's quite a long song, but it's very dramatic. I think it was a very good version of that particular song. And probably one of the more important tracks that we did was a track called A Sailor's Life, which was an early experiment in joining traditional music with rock music. And I think it was a very successful experiment. And for us it was a very enjoyable experience to record that in the studio. I think it was take one, and we hadn't really rehearsed it, but we just did it. And I think we decided that we liked music with good lyrics. And so we started tracking down songs with good lyrics, people like Dylan and Phil Oakes, and we started to do that material. And I think about '67 we were playing around the London clubs.
Playing around London clubs. What happened after that? Were you spotted by anyone?
Yes, we were spotted at the UFO club, but we tried.
You tried?
Yes.
Okay. What songs do you feel show Fairport at your best?
I think the best period of Fairport was when Sandy Denny was singing in the band, and some of her vocals I think were exceptional. There's a track called Who Knows Where the Time Goes, which Sandy sings. On the same album there's a Dylan song called Percy's Song, which I think is one of the best things.
All right. So, the first question. How did Fairport Convention come about?
Good question, yes. Gosh, okay, right. Yes, very good. Fairport started when I was at school, and it was a couple of school friends and myself got together and tried to figure out what kind of music we liked, which was the happening place in town at the time. And we were spotted by a certain Joe Boyd, who was an American gentleman who was helping to run the place. And we made records with him from that point onwards. And we got signed to Island Records. And we were there for many years, much to their embarrassment.
To their embarrassment? Why was it to their embarrassment?
Well, we never sold any records.